I was tired most of the time, and at times I couldn't even do anything because lifting a cup is just too much work because of all the pain I'm feeling, because of the swollenness and the stiffness, because you can't really move that much because your body is stiff.
Doctors might run all kinds of tests and find nothing, but this is a real illness.
It starts with fatigue, more than just being tired. Then come the aches, the swelling, the mysterious rashes. For some, it's a mild nuisance, but for others it is life-changing. Lupus, an autoimmune disease where the body's defense system turns against itself, attacking the joints, skin, and even vital organs. It is a disease that affects millions worldwide, yet remains misunderstood. Its cause remains unknown, its symptoms unpredictable. And here in Kenya, awareness is low, making early diagnosis a challenge. Today, we explore what it means to live with lupus in Kenya, from the struggles of diagnosis to the fight for affordable treatment. This is the story of those battling an invisible enemy and the doctors working to bring lupus out of the shadows.
My name is Dr. Ima Edonyi. I'm a consultant rheumatologist at the MP Shah Hospital here in Nairobi, Kenya. Lupus is one of those apparently rare conditions, but not as rare as it seems. It's a condition where the body is at war with itself. So all of us, the way God created us, we have a military system that actually defends our bodies against foreign invasion, just like any country defends its own integrity. And that's the immune system. But for some reason, just as it happens in human experience, we have a few soldiers that band together and become rebel soldiers. And that's exactly what happens with a group of conditions we call autoimmune diseases, of which lupus is one of the major conditions that it does that. So what happens is that those rebel soldiers turn their ammunition on the body, on the joints, on sometimes the lungs, sometimes the eyes, sometimes the kidneys, and begins to attack those things and cause what we call inflammation.
My name is Ella Angira. I'm a student at Masai Mara University in my 4th year studying journalism. It started back in Form 2. I was still in high school, and the first thing, it was during games actually, and I couldn't run like my friends because my feet were swollen and were in pain. And when I went to the nurse, she said maybe it's because of climate, because I studied in a different region that I had not studied in before. And then from there, it got worse.
In Kenya, specific data on the prevalence of lupus is limited. However, a study conducted at Kenyatta National Hospital between 2007 and 2017 identified 166 patients diagnosed with lupus, with a significant majority, 92.2%, being females aged 18 to 60 years.
Right now, there are no specific figures, but just as it is in the rest of Africa, there's a rising prevalence or a diagnosis of lupus.
After experiencing her first symptoms in high school, Ella sought medical attention at a local hospital where she received an initial misdiagnosis, a common occurrence with lupus due to its complex and elusive nature.
I went to the nearby district hospital and they diagnosed me with a bacterial infection.
So typically it tends to affect young people the most. A lot of times you find young people who probably been ill for a while, getting tired easily.
I was tired most of the time, and at times I couldn't even do anything because lifting a cup is just too much work because of all the pain I'm feeling, because of the swollenness and the stiffness, because you can't really move that much because your body is stiff.
Doctors might run all kinds of tests and find nothing, but this is a real illness, especially females of childbearing age.
It's just been on and off, different diagnoses, different doctors, different medication, just everybody had anything to say.
In some other cases, the person might just have blood counts that just keep dropping, and there's no explanation for it. So sometimes it comes in very weird and bizarre ways. And sometimes it's treated as malaria and it comes back in 2 or 3 weeks, which malaria doesn't do.
Some said it might be juvenile arthritis. Another one said, but a lot of them were saying it was either a bacterial infection or climate change.
Lupus is a complex autoimmune disease with multiple predisposing factors that contribute to its development.
Yes, so the trauma theory is that there are no known causes. Now, there are a few minor times, very, very few times you could identify what this may have led to it, maybe due to drug, but that is so minuscule. More often than not, it's what we call idiopathic in medicine. In other words, you do not know how it will arise. However, those who have a family history could have it. It's a likelihood. It doesn't mean they would always have it, but there is a likelihood that they would have it. So essentially, the predisposing factors with regards to lupus is the same for a lot of conditions, diseases, chronic diseases, and in particular autoimmune. Essentially, if you think of a forest fire would require dried leaves and a spark of a match. The dried leaves in themselves do not cause the forest fire, but you need the spark. So the dried leaves are the genetic predisposition. So the fact that you have a genetic predisposition doesn't necessarily mean you would have it. As a matter of fact, you could have it all your life and never come down with the symptoms. But there could be a spark in terms of the environmental conditions you might be exposed to, whether it's with cigarette smoking, being exposed to certain viruses, being exposed to certain substances in the atmosphere that are not good for the body, and that could be the trigger.
After consulting multiple doctors over the years, Ella was recently diagnosed with arthritis, an assessment that was close but not entirely accurate. Her physician referred her to Dr. Ima for further evaluation and a more comprehensive investigation.
Recently, before I came here, there's a doctor who said it might be arthritis, and that's why he sent me here.
So typically, because it cannot affect any organ, it's almost like a masquerader. It can masquerade as malaria very, very frequently. It can masquerade as joint pains, which you might just call arthritis. And in some scenarios, if you find a young person who comes down with a kidney problem, no prior history of diabetes, no prior history of hypertension, you just might be dealing with lupus because it can pick on any organ system.
Lupus presents with a wide range of symptoms, which can vary in severity and affect multiple organs.
It was majorly stiffness in the joints, swollenness, and I couldn't really move that much because of the stiffness and the pain, and the feet would normally swell. Yeah. Even a certain doctor even said I might have kidney failure, but we did several tests and I was okay. It wasn't kidney failure because he was saying because the way my feet were swollen and the way I was just explaining my symptoms, he said it might be that. But all the time it was just pain, stiffness, and just swollenness generally. Typically,
where we tend to, classically identify lupus, about 3 or 4 classic ways. One, someone who presents with joint pains that won't go, a fever that keeps coming off and on, and some skin lesions that sometimes will appear like a butterfly rash occasionally on the face or on the scalp or, around, sun-exposed areas of the skin, sometimes causing scarring. Once you have these 3 classic, symptoms coming together, then the likelihood that you might be dealing with lupus will be higher. Obviously, when you go to a doctor who has an idea of what it is, the first thing they would ask for is an ESR, which stands for erythrocyte sedimentation rate. So once you have these 3 plus at least that test, or any other test that may be indicative that it may be affecting some aspect of the body, then a specialist that deals with that condition, which is a rheumatologist, that patient should be referred to such a person.
When lupus is left untreated, the immune system continues to attack healthy tissues, leading to widespread inflammation and damage in various organs.
If not treated, what can happen, especially if the activity is high, it can cause a lot of discomfort. You can get very tired, very non-functional, not as productive as you should be. It's been known to also cause headaches, cause brain fogginess, seizures like I mentioned, and even be known to cause stroke and some neurological complaints. Kidneys, like I said, can be affected such that one could actually require a kidney biopsy or dialysis. So it's been known to also scar people's lungs, So these are all the different things, and even affect pregnancy, so that a woman keeps getting pregnant, but she keeps losing the pregnancy, especially within the first trimester. And that's because some of those rebel soldiers attack the vessels that supply the uterus and therefore reduce the amount of blood flow there.
Coming up after the break.
Because a lot of times people do not understand the disease, and when you come back home and they say that you kept falling ill.
It was just misdiagnosis after another until I came here.
As we continue to uncover the realities of living with lupus, it is clear that this condition is as complex as it is misunderstood. From the challenges of diagnosis to the daily battles with symptoms, those living with lupus navigate a journey that requires resilience and support. But there is more to this story. After the break, we will continue to listen to Ella's story and explore the advancements in treatment and care. We shall also speak to Dr. Ima one-on-one. Stay with us as we dive deeper into the fight against lupus. And now for a short healthcare tip. Managing lupus requires a proactive approach to health, as the condition can affect multiple organs and trigger unpredictable flare-ups. One key tip for individuals with lupus is to prioritize sun protection. UV rays from the sun can exacerbate symptoms, leading to skin rashes and even triggering systemic flare-ups. To reduce this risk, it is essential to wear broad-spectrum sunscreen with SPF 50 or higher. Also, dress in protective clothing such as long sleeves and wide-brimmed hats, and avoid direct sun exposure during peak hours. Additionally, maintaining a balanced diet rich in anti-inflammatory foods, staying hydrated, and managing stress through activities like meditation can help control symptoms. Regular medical checkups are crucial for monitoring disease progression and adjusting treatment plans to prevent complications. By taking these precautions, individuals with lupus can better manage their condition and improve their overall quality of life.
We are living in a lost and broken world, constantly bombarded by messages of hate and atrocities. But with God, we can overcome. Find hope and restoration on the go through life-changing shows on the Family Media app.
And then you will lose yourself and gain the world. And Jesus said, what good is it?
Get to stream Family TV and Family Radio 316 straight from your phone. Catch up on a show you missed or create video streaming playlists by saving and watching videos from our huge variety of shows at your own convenience. Download the Family Media app, available for all Android and iOS users on the Google Play Store and Apple Store respectively. Family Media, keeping Jesus on the airwaves.
Welcome back. Before the break, we explored the challenges of diagnosing lupus and how its elusive nature often leads to misdiagnosis, leaving many patients searching for answers for many years. Now, we turn our focus on Ella's journey, a story of resilience, uncertainty, and the daily struggles that come with living with this condition. We shall hear firsthand how lupus has shaped her life, the obstacles she has faced, and the importance of proper medical care in managing her symptoms. Up next, we sit down with Dr. Ima, who sheds more light on the complexities of lupus and how it affects those living with it.
The people who get lupus, do they face any stigma?
To an extent, yes. Because a lot of times people do not understand the disease. And when you come back home and they say that you kept falling ill, and now a doctor has mentioned this name that nobody's familiar with, so then people begin to look at you funny, especially if you're young and you're taking a lot of medication sometimes. You know how young people can be, so sometimes that kind of a stigma, can exist. And I've also seen scenarios where young ladies who were in relationships, with a young man, obviously, and that led to, that love relationship being tested, and with varying outcomes. There are those who obviously say, you know what, hands up, I can take this, because it requires a lot of support, a lot of understanding. Even though there are people who stuck with it and even gone on to get married, because they had understanding partners. But those are the difficulties on the social plane that a lupus patient can have, which is why more often than not, just as it is in Africa, being a very social, environment that we live in, it's important to not just only carry the patient along, but carry the patient's family along. So that way they're able to understand alongside the patient and also be able to support the patient adequately.
So what aspects of understanding do you mean in terms of perhaps what burden is there with the disease?
Yes, a basic understanding of what the disease is and what it is, causing. Sometimes the lupus might not even show up on the face, and at home, the young person is asked to do tasks that at that point in time he's not or she isn't able to carry out. But once you carry along the family, they're able to understand, okay, this person is probably going through a flare, or I can understand this, and therefore I know how to adjust my expectation for this person. I also know how to be supportive emotionally and otherwise with regards to such a person.
And do you feel like over time the disease outcomes are better?
Yes, as a matter of fact, with the advent of newer medication, understanding earlier diagnosis, the outcomes are reduced. About 50 or so years ago, when people began to know what lupus is about, at that time, in terms of 5 out of 10 persons will probably have ended up dead. But now we have 5 out of 100. So the outcomes have improved. And what has driven that is, specialized knowledge, specialized medication, more research, and awareness and early diagnosis and treatment of such patients.
I think that's fantastic, because when I was really young, when we had somebody had lupus, even the parents, everybody took it like, this is really, really dire and it would end up really bad. But definitely I feel like nowadays it's not considered such a bad thing.
Yes. As long as, like I say, it's diagnosed early. Unfortunately, I've seen scenarios where they came too late, or they ignored the warning signs, or they were too, lackadaisical in terms of following up with their treatments. And I've seen a few young persons lose their lives, not because it couldn't have been prevented, but just because they just didn't take it with the seriousness that it deserved. But again, these are all lessons to be learned for the future.
Lastly, do people with lupus need mental health support?
I think people with chronic diseases need mental health support, not just lupus. That's my point of view. As a matter of fact, doctors who treat patients with chronic disease, without carrying the toga of psychiatrists, because we are not psychiatrists, we're internists. But a lot of times we do give a lot of those, psychosocial or psychological support, because I can't imagine how many psychiatrists and psychologists will be able to deal with all of these. But yes, it is a need, and in lupus, it is a need specifically. In fact, it's even important to note that lupus itself can even lead to, as the underlying condition, to some psychological problems. I'll give an example. Several years ago, we were called to see a patient who was admitted in the psychiatric ward, of the hospital I was working at the time. It was a young girl, and she had severe depression. Someone just noted that in her blood work that her macro inflammation was elevated. And when we came and we realized, what, this lady has lupus. As a matter of fact, it's the lupus that had made her depressed. As in, not that she knew she had lupus, it was what was affecting the brain to cause the depression. Obviously, as we treated her, she became better and better. And right now, I think she's probably about to get married.
Wow.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Patients with lupus need emotional support just as much as medical care. Living with a chronic illness can be physically exhausting and emotionally challenging.
Lupus isn't really for the weak because it's emotionally draining to be sick. The people around you are even straining, they're also in pain because you're in pain. I think from the support groups, they should give people like fast emotional support. Luckily, I also got a friend in school, and sometimes she would pray with me. She'll be like, Mama, you'll be okay. Then she'll just pray with me. When I was feeling low, just call her. She'll be there for me.
Lupus is diagnosed through a combination of medical history, physical examination, and laboratory tests, since no single test can confirm the disease.
In terms of making a diagnosis, the classical way, the doctor's going to have to hear your story, because a lot of times people can't make sense of their story because it doesn't fit into what they are used to or what they know. You know how malaria presents, you know how a flu is, you know when you have a migraine. Once you have those, you can understand and you can tell the story. But sometimes it requires a skilled person to be able to ask you to tell the story, ask some very specific questions, and be able to get certain things you probably thought nothing of. Put those symptoms together and then decide on the certain tests.
Like every day I used to go to the clinic or to the hospital. Every day is just a different test. But mostly they were measuring on arthritis. These past visits, I've gone to the doctor.
So specifically those tests will be looking for some of those rebel soldiers, and they're very specific. One of them is called the anti-nuclear antibody. While specific is not as specific, then you have more specific ones like the anti-double-stranded DNA, very specific. You have another one called the anti-Smith, and there are several others. Sometimes it may not be any of these, but it just be a combination of these and how high they are that begins to give an indication that this might be what is going on.
Well, he had what I was saying, like my symptoms, how I was feeling, how was everything, and then we did certain tests just to confirm that it's not the arthritis that they first thought of. We did several tests, and then we found that I was suffering from lupus.
That would first of all decide on the diagnosis, secondly decide on if there are certain organs that have been affected, and thirdly decide on how high the disease activity is, because the higher the disease activity, the more ill you're likely to become.
With the right treatment and care, many people with lupus can lead fulfilling lives while managing their condition effectively.
Typically, the way it's treated is to actually suppress those rebel soldiers, those rebel immune cells. And typically there are different ways or different kinds of medications, again, based on the types of symptoms you present with. So those would determine what type. But there are certain ones that are very basic, but essentially they're all aimed at reducing the activity of the disease and even, quote unquote, killing those cells. But it's not a cure, but it's a treatment. Why would I say it's not a cure? Because you don't take the medication once and you say, I'm never going to have this again. Because what happens is, when you kill some, they keep giving birth. So you need to consistently ensure that they are under control.
Lupus cannot be completely prevented because its exact cause is unknown. However, for those at risk, certain lifestyle choices may help reduce the likelihood of triggering the disease or managing flare-ups.
It's difficult to say that it can be prevented, especially given the way I've just described how it can occur. However, one level of prevention, because in medicine when we talk about prevention at various levels. We talk about prevention in terms of having the condition at all. We talk about prevention in it progressing and causing damage. So I think one of the biggest ways in which you can prevent it having a big impact on your life is it being diagnosed early. It's been proven that once you have early diagnosis, it improves the outcomes and reduces the impact on your life. The other supporting act, such as diet and exercise, are also critical as well, and will be put together in such a management or treatment plan.
I've actually changed my diet to be like more vegetables and more proteins and less of carbohydrates, the starch. Yeah, that's what the doctor recommended.
As of now, the Kenyan government has not implemented specific policies or programs dedicated solely to lupus awareness, treatment or support. Many patients with lupus often rely on support from non-governmental organizations and patient groups to navigate the challenges associated with the disease.
In East Africa and Kenya and other parts of Africa, non-communicable diseases are beginning to get more attention, but it's limited to things like hypertension, diabetes, asthma and things like that. But not a lot is given to lupus, and that's because a lot of people are not trained, talking about healthcare workers, to be able to identify it. And I think that is where, the first port of call can be done.
We first went to several public hospitals because they were the ones that were close to me at the time. And actually it wasn't nice because you're just being thrown around. They weren't caring that much about the pain that you were in. It was just misdiagnosis after another until I came here.
I think if they can also help in terms of establishing care pathways, so that whenever there is a minimal suspicion based on some of these minimal things, they can be referred up the referral chain and pathway to the rheumatologist.
They should educate people on lupus, because when I was suffering from lupus, there was a time I used to have a limp because of the pain and the stiffness. Now one side is better kinda than the other, so you just have to limp as you're walking, and then a lot of people just look at you funny and weird, like, so I'm just limping, it's not that bad, but it is that bad.
Ella's journey over the past 6 years has been long and challenging, filled with uncertainty and frustration. But at last, she found a specialist who gave her the right diagnosis, changing everything.
Well, actually the medicine are working fine. There is no more pain, there is no more swelling, there's no more stiffness. I'm actually going back to my old life, if I can say so myself. But the pain is there, like once, not as much as it was there. Before I'd rate it like an 8 out of 10, but now it's like a mild 3 on a bad day. But normally there's no pain whatsoever.
As we wrap up today's episode, we've gained a deeper understanding of the challenges that those living with lupus face, from the often elusive diagnosis to the ongoing battle for proper care. Ella's journey serves as a powerful reminder of the strength required to live with this condition that is as unpredictable as it is complex. It is clear that the path forward for lupus patients lies in early diagnosis, effective treatment, and unwavering support of healthcare professionals and loved ones. Thank you for joining us in this important conversation. Until next time, let us continue advocating for better awareness, understanding, and care for those living with lupus.